All right, hi everybody. Welcome to the Hart Initiative and the Hart Studio Show. So I'm Barclay Brown, the host of the show, and here with Honor Lind, who's the Executive Director of the Hart Initiative. So hey, Honor. Hey, say hi, Honor.
Hi, and thanks for being here today. We appreciate y'all attending and learning a little bit more about the storytelling through art and recycled art from Robert Dampier and his beautiful partner.
Thanks. And the Hart Initiative, just to say a couple of words about that, is about art and community, and about healing through art, and about bringing art to the community in different forms, involving people in art. We think art is a way of healing, and communicating and healing and understanding the human experience. We've had a lot of interesting human experiences over the last year or so here in the COVID world, right? Surprisingly enough. So lots of new kinds of experiences to explore through art and whatnot, right? So let's just jump right to our guests. So Robert and Tulisha Dampier are from Texas and are well-known artists and also champions of the concept of an earth ship, which we'll get into all of that here just momentarily if you don't know what any of that is. And so welcome, guys. Say hello.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, terrific. Well, I want to just jump right into the thick of it, like right into the middle of it, okay?
Sure.
And I noticed something, and you can tell me if I'm crazy here or if I'm kind of seeing something, right? That there seems to be an interesting parallel or juxtaposition between Robert, you as an artist who has come to focus on found object art, creating, and we'll get more into what that is if people don't know, but reusing objects, objects that you find or that maybe were discarded or something. We'll get into all that, but that kind of approach, and then gravitating toward this earthship kind of approach, which is, found object art is creating art out of found objects. It's almost like earthships are creating homes out of found objects,
Right.
That you're actually going to live in. So
Right.
is there something philosophical that underlies all of this that you can kind of identify and talk to? Does this make sense this way?
Sure. Well, with assemblage and working with found objects, I mean, it's something I've naturally done for a long time. And building out here in a natural environment using, the resources that are here, is kind of the same way, where you're just, instead of always trying to use the new, which you do always need, for solar and different things like that for infrastructure, but for your home itself, it really is kind of creating, for the longest time, I did assemblage boxes and things in boxes and different containers. And, to me, the natural evolution of that is to now create a home that becomes a sacred space where it really is just a work of art that's expanded, that you can be in and experience and live in. So that's kind of what we're trying to do out here, is just get homesteaded, get our infrastructure together so that we can start to utilize the environment, the earths that are here, the natural woods, the stone. There's so much geology and stone out here. And create something that people can come to. My goal personally is to have a space where artists can come and stay, almost like a residency, and disconnect from the world for a little while, and have a place where they can still be connected, but be out in the middle of the desert, out in the middle of the mountains, and just enjoy quiet and serenity and
no white noise.
Kind of, turn off the white noise and see what comes out, and to explore their creativity in an environment that's not constantly, trying to get their attention.
So is the feeling somehow different? I guess that's what I'm hearing, is the feeling somehow is different, where, again, both with a piece of art that's created out of sort of natural materials or pre-existing things, as opposed to something new, like buying some new paint and taking a new canvas and painting a new painting, which is fine. But is there a different feel to something like that than the kind of art you're talking about? And then similarly, is there a different feel in being in a space or being in a home that was also constructed out of naturally occurring materials and things, sort of different than buying a bunch of lumber and building a house? What's the difference?
Right. Yeah. To me, in modern building, everything just is, everything's in a square, everything's in a box, everything's very sterile and, very linear. And, in nature, there rarely is anything linear. You know, nature likes to work in circles and different strange objects and shapes. And so to create a home that feels natural, it feels like something that you would find or just has the feeling of almost like when you go to like South America and you see some of these primitive homes that are so beautiful, that are built with mesquite and old aged wood, and the walls are hand stuccoed and adobe'd, and you know, it just, there's something to the feel of an environment like that just when you come into it, you just feel comfortable, you just feel connected, it feels natural. So
organic.
that's kind of the idea, is to try to create that out here. You know, a lot of people here will go with dirts and little sheds, or just build little boxes and things. And we were kind of starting out that way a little bit just because it's simpler. But, you know, over time, getting the resources and everything together, you know, we're going to be able to build something more, it's sustainable. It'll be here forever. I mean, some of the adobe homes that are here from the early 1900s, they're still here. In the 1800s, they're still, you know, granted, some of them are falling apart, but the bricks are still there. The structure is still there. So there's something to be said for the longevity of the materials out here. So it's something that's fun to explore, and to allow others to explore and get their hands on as well.
So some of this started with the Earthship kind of movement, right? And Michael Reynolds, which
Right.
Tulisha, is that what I remember that you kind of studied with him, or that was part of the origin of this? And tell us how that got going a little bit.
I did early in my early 20s. I moved from Texas to go to school in Boulder, Colorado. And I moved with two friends from Texas, and we were roommates. And one semester during a break, they were like, hey, we're going to New Mexico to work with Michael Reynolds. You want to come along? And I was like, absolutely. I mean, I had an interest in sustainable living, you know, since my, you know, late teens, and it was always just an interest of mine. And it was an amazing, crazy, because he is very interesting. And this was like 20 plus years ago. And it just always stuck with me, just the experience. It was hard, intense work, as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
But just so rewarding on every level. And that's kind of what we experience daily here, which is pretty wonderful.
And what, you know, tell us a little bit more about that original project. What was he doing? Was this the filling in the tires and making homes out of that, or something? What I remember that being one of the early forms of this.
It was, yeah, in New Mexico and Taos. It was basically, and it was during the winters. So we lived in this unfinished, kind of like we did here, this last snowpocalypse. You just lived in this unfinished space, and you got up and you pounded tires all day. And it was wonderful. And so they kind of worked you through the progress. I mean, we were just volunteers. And so they worked you through the process of pounding the tires and bottles, and you kind of learned a little, you know, about, you know, solar was a little different then. It's come a long way since then. And it does yearly almost now, but yeah, it was just an exciting time to be a part of it.
So then and of course I'm an engineer by background, so I'm always interested in how these things work out, right? So the packed tire approach to building has been tried for quite a while, as you said. I mean, back when you were doing this, has that stood the test of time? Are there still homes that are that way, and that's worked out, or how's that gone?
Oh, absolutely. Oh yeah, he has a whole community now in New Mexico, and it's built all around that. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think people thought he was kind of crazy when he came out with it, because, you know, that was an architect, kind of like the super Adobe architect, same thing. It was just so different. But yeah, no, he's doing very well. And there's a great documentary called Garbage Warrior about him that kind of follows from then to now. So yeah, it's definitely exciting.
That's great. But nevertheless, as you went to set up your development where you are now, you started with, if I'm right, shipping containers as kind of your first raw material, as opposed to the tires. So what was that choice about?
Well, out here, there's no infrastructure whatsoever. You're literally just plopped down in the middle of the desert. So, in order to build a home like that, the way he does it with the tires and everything else, you have to have resources, and it takes time to gather those resources. And unlike in a big city or when you're near a big town, out here in Terlingua, it's a very sparse community. So there's no big tire shops or places, you literally have to kind of, go from your neighbors and people that that might have some extra tires on their property. And so it takes a little longer out here to accumulate the resources to start building in that manner. So for us, a container was an easy way to take something, have it dropped off, and it's a box, and it's got a door. So, from there, the first container we got was a studio container, so that I had a place to put all my tools, like a little workshop and a generator to work out of. And then we got a second container 16 feet offset from that one. And we've lived out of that one for a little while. And then we built a space in between the two containers that gave us the approximate square footage of a third. And we were starting to build out of this one. So this, one of the things out here before we start building other, what I would call like the art buildings, we have to get our infrastructure together. You've got to have your solar, you've got to have some running water, collecting water, getting all your piping and your plumbing and kind of the basic infrastructure that, most people take advantage of and don't really think about, in a urban city. All of these things you have to kind of fine tune and get working and,
get semi-comfortable.
Sure, because there's not a lot of water out here. So your roof is your water catchment. So you have to think in terms of water catchment. And, with like some of these dome tomes and things, as beautiful as they are, one of the things that we've run into out here is you've got to have a nice flat surface
to
catch water on, because you want to catch every drop of water that you can. Because there's really no wells out here. There's a few, but it's kind of hit or miss, and they're very expensive. So that's one of the things everyone always told us when we first got out here is
shade and water.
Got to get your shade and water. And so that's kind of what we're doing now, is trying to establish our infrastructure so that we have the means and electricity and, and water too, because if you're going to do home construction, whether it's natural or Adobe or whatever, you got to have water. So it's kind of, this past year has really been just about putting down the roots and trying to get the foundations together so that, then it is about expanding into, the tire homes, and I also want to do super Adobe with bags and, just whatever we can try to put together out here.
So I got it. So it's not about a particular technology. It's not that, okay, we're all about doing containers, or tires or something. It's more the whole idea of taking what's available and using it, somehow.
Yes,
and as I look at Michael Reynolds, I was reading a little bit about what he said about the Earthship, kind of the fundamental definition. And it really is this kind of home that's completely off the grid. And I see that you're completely off the grid. And maybe this is why you're where you are, is because you're like, well, okay, if we go here, we're going to be off the grid because there is no grid here, right? So we wouldn't even be tempted to hook into some grid because there's no grid, right?
Right.
And so here you are. And so of necessity, sort of like settlers in the new world or something like that, you've got to kind of make it all up, right?
Right.
So Reynolds talks about these different areas of making an Earthship something, independent. So I thought we'd maybe talk about each of these, and maybe you can say, well, what's your thought on this, and then how you're approaching it in your settlement. Sure. You mentioned a couple of them already, right? So the first one is energy. So heating and cooling. That's I assume one of the harder things, because that takes more energy than something like light or something. So, and I also noticed that the climate there in Terlingua it's not San Diego, right? You have a much wider range. You go from just below freezing to over 100 average in some months in the high in the summer. So how do you approach heating and cooling? Is that just being tough, or is it a lot of technology, or what do you do?
It's one of those things at first. Yeah, you just got to be tough, because when we first got out here, we were just,
We got here in May.
we packed everything into a storage container in order just to store all of our house stuff and everything. And it was like, okay, we're just going to stay in this little trailer at a friend's property who's about a mile down the road. There's no AC, no real comforts. We had no running water, any of that stuff. So you're kind of camping. When we got here, it was just, we're going to camp for a while. And then once we got the containers here, then we kind of had a place to come to. But as far as heating and cooling, yeah, during the summer, it's just hot. And that's why, we just got four new batteries so that we can double our solar capacity, because we're hoping this summer, maybe we can run a little split air unit or some efficient little AC unit that doesn't try to, pull too much power. But for the most part, you just want to get in the shade. You want to have your building kind of under something or shade it a little bit, or you want to have really thick walls.
You want insulation, right? Now, had you looked at one of the approaches I know that some of the Earth ships have taken to cooling is, there's two kinds of geothermal, right? There's geothermal, like just put the thing underground or partially underground. And then there's geothermal, like we're going to dig into the ground and take advantage of the temperature gradients below the surface. Does that work? Is that something you're considering or could consider? Either of those kinds of things?
We happen to be in a really good spot here because the geography here is, one side of 118, the major road that comes in, it just looks like the moon. It's just crazy,
everybody calls it the moon,
geography.
Oh, wow.
And where we are is kind of like in the flats in a little valley. Because where we are, we can dig into the ground. I've noticed at least 3 or 4 feet. So we can do things like burying pipe through the ground in order to catch the air, run it through the ground, and then pipe it into our home. But there are places here where it's solid bedrock. So things like that just aren't applicable there. But yeah, there's different ways of, even on the outside of our containers, we've considered, adobeing the outside, or, doing little mud clump balls or something on the outside just to create little micro shadows in order to keep it a little cooler. Cause steel just gets hot. When it's exposed to the sun.
It's still a fairly dark color too. Does it help to paint them white?
Well, we did. We painted.
We painted ours. We used
a
material called elastomeric, which has some insulative properties. It's not huge, but any little bit, makes a huge difference out here.
So another tan.
Yeah. So we've gone a lighter, natural, more sandy.
Oh, I see. Okay. There you go.
Lighten them up because they were a bit dark.
All right, and then heat. What are you doing for heat in the wintertime?
Propane. A little. We have a little buddy.
We have a little propane heater that we've been using to keep our little space warm. Some of the guys in the community, we have such a wonderful community here.
Absolutely.
Everybody really takes care of each other. But we've gotten a couple of little tiny
wood burning
stoves, little antique wood burning stoves. And so that's one of our projects of many projects is to get the wood burning stoves working and get the pipes and all those installed and everything, so that when we do heat, we can do it through wood, which there's plenty of out here, instead of having to burn propane, which, propane's nice for cooking and things like that, but I really hate wasting it just for heat.
So it sounds like the goal would be to get to not having to use propane. That's sort of a temporary measure. Is that kind of your view of that?
Well, yeah. As far as just heating the house, yeah.
We'll have it. Yeah. Well, and you make a good point, Barclay. We're kind of on the move to stay warm before winter hit. Hence the enclosed space, which we did in the nick of time. And now the goal for summer is to try to stay cool when
'Cause-
summer hits.
Because one of the downfalls of containers, just so people know, is if you're going to stay in a container during the winter, anytime it drops below 32 degrees and then it comes back up above 32 degrees, your container starts to rain on the inside.
Yeah, you get interior rain. If it's not
And
insulated
so
yet.
you'll get condensation on the roof and it just starts pouring all over until you open it up and let the, moisture out. So that's why we created this space in between, which I built myself, and there's a plywood and steel roof, is so we didn't have the condensation, because we would have just been rained on every morning at 32 degrees.
Yeah.
So
So we got here just in time for that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And interesting because of course, that's just pulling the moisture out of the air that's already inside,
Right.
and just changing its form. So it's making the air, drier as it condenses the moisture out of it and so forth. Yeah.
And
Is
when
that
you're
something-
using propane heat,
Is that something you can use for future if you're trying to build an ecosystem of sustainability for plants and
Well, it's only doing that because we haven't insulated it yet. Once we insulate it, that won't be an issue.
like spray foam insulation, or
Oh,
and I've
gotcha.
even done some research on hydrophobic paints or something that would just keep the moisture from accumulating on the metal. But it's just one of those things you have to deal with until you remedy the problem.
right.
You mentioned something like spray foam insulation, and I guess that's what I'm trying to sort of sort out in my mind here. This is just sort of my interest. Honor can reel me back in if we're getting to techie engineer talk here, but this, I've got a whole bunch of spray foam insulation in this house. We built this house about 5 years ago, and one of the things the builder did was spray foam insulate the attic and all of the connections and a whole bunch of different parts of the house, right? And this makes a huge difference, right? But that's a very high tech material. I don't know if it's petroleum based, but it's not. It's not, I guess, what some people would call a sustainable material, and yet it's very effective, and it's very it's efficient, and it's inexpensive for what it does, compared to maybe other kinds of insulation and fiberglass insulation and things like that. So how do you judge? I guess I'm wondering what's sort of the rule set here as to what's goodness and badness in components or technologies or things to use. How do you evaluate that sort of thing?
I'm not. When people come out with new technologies and new ways of insulating or heating or any of these things, I'm always open. I mean, you try to use natural things when you can, but in certain situations, putting mud on the ceiling of the container, there's no way to get it to stick or to stay, and the heat differential, in the metal from cooling at night to heating during the day to cooling at night. You have to have something that's going to stay, stick, and last. So, certain things like that, if you're doing a tire home, or say you're doing super adobe, those things aren't necessary. That's only a necessary evil because we're trying to work within a metal building. And it's one of the downfalls of the metal building. But
sometimes you have to use the new and the old together. I mean,
because it's in certain instances, I'm not so much a Puritan where, everything has to be from the ground or it's just not acceptable. I mean, I like comfort, just like we have internet now, and, we do have electricity, and, we like modern amenities and things like that. And, when it's 120 degrees, and you feel the radiant heat coming through the container and there's no air conditioning, a little spray foam insulation might not be so
it's a reasonable trade-off, perhaps, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Not to,
so tell us about
dehydration.
Let's go to that. So tell us about food, food and water. Maybe we'll start with food. So do you take different approaches to food than maybe sort of your normal suburban family does?
Well, I mean, our food consumption has definitely changed out here. Just because
we don't eat out.
There's
often.
out here, your options are very limited. So we cook a lot at home. Matter of fact, almost all the time, maybe on an occasion on, a birthday or something like that, we'll go to the restaurant in town or something like that.
It's kind of nice not to have so many choices though.
And
simplifies things.
And
that's a very interesting
here,
dynamic. I wonder if that's part of it. Sorry, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you answering my question here, which is really bad form. But it's interesting because the psychologists tell us that choice fatigue is something that is a plague in our society and is sapping energy and things like that. Having so many choices, sitting down in front of the TV, it used to be hundreds of channels. Now it's hundreds of ready to watch shows just, streaming, right? But the same thing. It's the same choice overwhelm. So having fewer choices does, well, you tell me, does it bring a certain calmness, a certain more sort of peace somehow? Or go ahead, say more about that.
Yeah. And, like you were saying, as far as choice paralysis and things out here, because your choices are limited and there's a lot of just locally grown things.
Lots of bartering.
Yeah. There's a local place, the Sul Ross University.
That's where we get some meat.
They provide meat that's grown agriculturally through the university and everything. And so, you're getting something that hasn't been, where it came from.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of locals grow vegetables and share.
But out here, this is a strange thing that I've kind of over the year kind of found personally, is that you don't eat as much because there's always something to do out here. When we were living in the city, you tend to kind of just become comfortable, and you go from your house to what you do, back to your house, out to eat, visit friends, go back to your house. You kind of find this routine of where you're not really exerting a lot. Whereas out here, it's like the frontier. So, you're having to take care of your toilet needs and making sure you're, composting and taking care of those things and, getting your water and getting that, brought in. And so there's just,
the emphasis isn't on
you're not obsessed with eating so much, because so many people eat when they're bored. And there's so many people that just get kind of bored because, like you said, there's so much TV to watch, so much entertainment, so many things to keep you distracted. Whereas out here, just living day to day and taking care of your daily needs almost becomes part of a job or part of your work scope. And that, and then working every day to improve your infrastructure and everything else. So food just doesn't hold so much of a priority out here anymore. Tish and I both have lost an incredible amount of weight.
Lost a lot of weight.
And without really trying, it's just our eating habits have changed so much, where we just, we eat our little something in the morning and a little something, in the evening, and we're good.
We'll look good by our second summer here.
So all right. So this is the big elephant in the room here. Okay, that I've got to address. So it may be a little bit of a devil's advocate kind of question here, but let me just sort of throw this out, right? The question, I guess I could summarize this way: why? In other words, why saddle yourself with all of this difficulty, right, and challenge, and go to the frontier and have all this stuff? Yes, it takes up your time. It gives you something to do. It's interesting. You've got to think about your sewage needs, as opposed to most people who don't think about them, right? So all of those additional tasks, right? So we get the dynamics and what happens. And if you were on a mission to Mars and this was a necessity, right? In other words, there's no other way to live on Mars than primitively. Right. I mean, that's it. But the why is, I wanted to go to Mars. Right. I mean, Mars was the objective, but your situation is you kind of did this all on purpose. So why?
Well, one of the main things is, as an artist, we've always had to pay for a studio and either rent a studio, or I had it underneath our house. But even underneath the house, you're paying a mortgage on that house. And there goes $1,500 or $2,000 or whatever it is a month that has to go towards housing. And then you've got your utilities like water and electricity, and all these things start to accumulate every month. And I found, as an artist, you start to focus on the art, your focus on art isn't so much on being free with what you're making as much as trying to think, okay, I've got to make a living at this. I've got to, get it out there. I've got to, promote it. I got to do all these things. And because you have those bills every month that you've got to pay for. And for us, it was really about
Freedom.
disconnecting from all that to where we've paid for our land. So there's no more rent. We're, paying cash and whatever for each of our things that we get. We don't go into debt getting containers or materials or everything else. We buy stuff as we have the funds to do it. But
And also
we
like
haven't
challenges.
but we haven't paid a utility bill. And I've had the freedom out here to just have a studio, and I don't have to worry about neighbors if I'm making noise or, bothering other people because I want to hammer and grind on something or weld or whatever it is we're doing. We're miles away from anyone. So, there's a certain freedom out here that
Peace of mind.
that is worth whatever sacrifices you have to make. Because once you eat your vegetables and you do the hard work, get your infrastructure in, well, then it's all just, again, there's no utility bills, there's no mortgages, all of that is taken out of the equation. So then it's
That's
just
fantastic.
about making it work.
And I got to say that this is fabulous because that's not the answer I expected, which is always fun in an interview. So Honor, you wanted to chime in. Go ahead.
Well, I just have to say, as a fellow artist, I haven't been on my bench in probably 5 years. And so it's my heart song you're singing because you're being so authentic to yourself. And I think you can attest it. It almost hurts when you have all these narratives that you want to express, because I find that true art is best spoken when the narrative can be expressed in whatever media that you choose, whether it's found objects, assemblage, photography, poetry, dance, written word,
Right.
jewelry making. I mean, I dabble in small metals and storytelling, and I put it all together there. And I started a tent program, There Is No Trash, here at the Hart Initiative that we're trying to launch in April, for that very nature, to start collecting discarded goods for remake, retask, rethink, repurpose, reuse, for
Right.
the creative collective consciousness like yourself. And so you guys are speaking my language, and I'm ready to move out to the desert with you and rough it on the land. And because I do find that the constraints that we have in today's world often, even though I work in nonprofit and fundraising and development and bringing it all together for community engagement and impact and awareness, I wind up on those causes and missions more than my personal plight to tell my story as an artist. So
Right.
I would like to ask, because you are so authentic to yourself, and I love the fact that you are thinking in the terms of bringing artists out there. There are artist in residency programs that I'm trying to work with Oakland Island, and now I want to kind of add you to the mix. Is that something that you see in building? You said you're miles away and you have this wonderful freedom to create because you're not constrained. Are you inviting other artists to come out there on a permanent basis is one question. And then again, with the artist in residency program, I'd like to talk to you more on a future episode about that. If you would consider us maybe working on that type of process to retreat.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
So tell us about that.
Well, I mean, as far as having other artists come out here, it's permanently, if an artist has it in their heart, and they're willing to sacrifice, modern amenities and everything else, I think this place is an extremely magical place in order to be creative. Because it's raw, it's untouched.
No distractions.
What you see out here is how it's been for thousands of years. You can walk just outside our house and find arrowheads on the ground. And you're looking at it going, oh my God, this thing has been here for hundreds, maybe thousands, who knows? Because, we're right in part of the Comanche Trail.
We see the Milky Way.
And then, you know, at night,
Oh, wow.
the stars, we have some of the darkest skies in the United States. And there's a lot of observatories and astronomers that are starting to come out here now. So, you know, as far as an artist coming out here permanently, yeah, if you've got the chutzpah and you've got the inkling, you know, this place is, it's wonderful. And the community is very supportive out here.
Extremely.
But, you know, I know that's not going to be realistic for all artists. So again, that's why I want to make this place available, because when I came out here the first time, I felt so emptied and just calm and relaxed. Just being out here in nature and hearing the wind blow through the creosote, hearing the ravens in the sky, just
coyotes.
It's just the coyotes sing every morning and every evening. You know, when I left here, I just felt great. And that's when Tish and I decided, you know, we've got to get a little piece of property out here.
And I dreamt about it every night for 6 months. Like it never left us.
And we had a little bit in our savings. So it was like, hey, let's just pull the trigger and do it. And now that we're here, you know, because this seemed like a fantasy for a while. It was just something you saw in your head. And now a year later being here, you know, getting like I said, the infrastructure together so that, you know, we can have artists out here who, you know, if they can spend a week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever they can accommodate, you know, we want to build. That's another reason why we want to build these little natural places is to have little works of art that people can live in and stay in while they're here. And, you know, I want to build out my studio so that I have stuff for, you know, ceramics, or if someone wants to do pottery with the natural soils here. Because there's green clay, red clay, orange clay. I mean, it's just a rainbow of colors from the ground. So being able to have the resources to make these things available so that someone can come out here, and if they want to paint, they can paint. I've got an artist friend in Japan, Hiroki Doi, who we'd love to have come out here, you know, to do his work. Musicians as well. We've got friends.
There's a lot of musicians in Big Bend.
Margaret Lejeune from Two Star Symphony. We'd love to have them out here to compose if they want to, and just make the space available for others to be inspired, so that when they do go back into the world, you know, they leave here with something. They leave here changed. They leave here different, and you know, this place would always be open for them to come back and recharge and, you know,
press the reset button.
Sure.
There's kind of a tradition, you know, you could say in the lore, I guess, of art, of the artist kind of withdrawing, you know, kind of getting separate from the world, whatever the world meant at that time for that artist, and going away and being sort of solitary in a way. Do you think that's part of the artistic process? It sounds like you've turned that into almost like a practice, you know, where you tasted it and then you're saying, okay, now this can be something, whether it's permanent or temporary. Does that contribute somehow to the artistic process?
Oh, sure. I mean, because I liken it, you know, to, you know, if you were going to write a beautiful symphony, you can't write that beautiful symphony if someone's playing really loud rock music in the room that you're trying to compose in. And yet, as people every day, as artists, we're always bombarded with, you know, our phones and our text messages and phone calls and things to do and our jobs. And, you know, that's that outer noise, you know, that everyday outer noise. And, you know, for most people that live in the city, that just becomes a part of their everyday life. And they have to try to deal with that in their heads. And yet at the same time, try to dig in and feel what's going on in here, you know, in the heart, and to explore that. And so, yeah, to come out here and turn the noise off so that, you know, and it may take an artist 2-3 days, it may take them a week
Decompress.
just to adjust
decompress
to the quiet and decompress. And you want to be able to give someone that space where it's like, look, if you want to go wander around for a couple days and just smell the air and take in the rocks and the nature and do that, so that when you come back to the studio here, now you can paint. Now you can be inspired. You've had some time to your own thoughts, your own emotions, what's going on inside of you, instead of just this constant, world needing your attention, needing your opinion, needing your thoughts on this, needing, it's just, there's something to be said exactly to just cutting off the noise, cutting off the extraneous input that we in this 21st century have kind of become very accustomed to. Whereas even artists in the 50s and 60s, they were still a little quiet. There wasn't all the social media and all the chitter chatter and all these things. And, out here, you can just be a human on the planet.
It sounds like it's still a balance, right? Because you're withdrawing and you're separate, but you're still connected, right? There's a community there that you're building. So you're connected at that level. And then, here we are, taking the show out to the outside world, right? You didn't say, oh, no, we're separate. We're off in our little place in Texas. We don't want to talk to anybody outside. You're sharing, right? And you're communicating.
Oh, yeah.
So it's how do you balance the internal and the away with the community engagement somehow?
Well, they're building a community. Even Lord Byron and Shelley, artists have been retreating together for a long time, renting, mansions in the south of France and stuff like that. So, and even Dolly and his gang of eccentrics, they would just not eat for 24 hours and, see cook them.
Exactly.
Right.
And maybe
art.
And maybe that is the upside compared to then and now, is you can still stay in touch, but still have.
Right. Oh, I love that you're in this community, and but I'm curious because I've been following your art for some time now, and I want to invite you both to the show periodically to talk about your progression and showcase your art. And I did want to take some time, if you could, your artwork, it embodies a lot of what you said today. And I've been following you, I think, for maybe 2, maybe 3 years now, because I'm just so fascinated by the found objects, the way you assemble the art, and you can tell that it's found assemblage, and then the stories that you tell with the big eyes and the mountains and the sunbeams are just remarkable. Can you talk about your creative process of your artwork and how you brought that? Talk about interruption of modern technology. It's actually a house, if you can believe that. But I would like to hear your story on how you put your artwork together and the creative process of that.
Sure. It starts out very, very humbly. It's all about accumulating objects and sourcing, what people might find as junk or whatever. To me, there's no such thing as junk, and the world is so full of so many objects. That's why I try not to use new things that often. Not that I'm totally anti new stuff, but my philosophy is there's already a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that goes to the trash. There's a lot of stuff that goes to the dump. There's stuff that people just, well, I don't need this. It's still good, but I don't need it. So it goes to the trash. Whereas to be able to look through what most people might consider refuge and go, oh no, that's a great little piece of wood. That's a great little piece of metal. Look at this little thing. If you just tear this off and break that up, look at it, you can use it like this. So as far as the process, I go hunting, and it all starts with just object hunting. And then you'll accumulate.
Which is so much fun.
Oh, sure. Yeah. That's
well, how do you, so tell me about that. What does object hunting look like? Maybe it's different where you used to live and now where you are, but how do you, how do you hunt objects?
Well, back in Galveston, it was very, very simple and easy because there were so many alleys and antique shops and the beach. There were so many places,
and people would leave us stuff.
Right, people would bring us their things because they knew we used found objects. So people would always hey, I was going to throw this away, can you use this? And I never said no.
Yeah, we come home to bones in our mailbox, like
sure. Whereas out here, it's a little different. There's not the retail availability. There's no alleys or, you know, cityfied areas with stuff. So I've had to adapt to just looking for what's here in the desert and, you know, scrounging around for things that people have left behind. You know, there's lots of old rusty tin cans and metal objects that have been out here for 100 years.
People have given up scraps here that they didn't want.
Sure.
I mean, that's the community. Once, yeah, they knew.
And now people know that's what we use, or, you know, used objects and stuff. So now we're starting the same thing starting again, now that we're getting to know people, where things are coming in and people are like, oh yeah, I've got a bunch of wood scraps. Do you want them? Oh, heck yeah, bring them by. So, yeah, so it's just all about hunting, just looking. And part of the fun of hunting is just you're enjoying nature and you're enjoying the environment while you're doing it. Because you're just walking around and you're seeing things you've never seen before, seeing cactuses you've never seen before, rocks you've never seen before,
Skulls.
old pieces of wood that just are old and beautiful. So that, you know, nature leaves all kinds of gifts for you to find if you choose to look for them. So I've been able to adapt.
Well, I'm going to stray out of my lane here and ask a kind of an art question. So if this totally doesn't make any sense, you know, Honor can straighten me out here. But I'm wondering how you get from, all right, found objects. So we've accumulated found objects, right? Now your artwork, I mean, to my eye, is just amazing, right? It's almost like you decided what you were going to create, and then you made every object to perfectly fit in that piece of art. Right. That's what it looks like. Right. It's that unified. So, and this may be a too large a question, who knows, right? But how do you get from this giant storehouse, right, of stuff that you've collected to this perfect integration of things that, again, looks like they were purpose made for that piece of art?
Well, it's actually, you know, like you just said, it's actually the opposite of that. Like you were saying, where I have the objects and you'll be looking at all these miscellaneous things and it's like, okay, I need a background for this piece and I need something for it to be in. So I'll look for the box, or, you know, I'll build something out of wood that's a platform for all the objects to sit and live on. And so that is your beginning process, is to get your base of what your art piece is going to be built on. And then once you do that, you just kind of
pieces come together.
Yeah, you start to see, okay, I've got some metal circles and I've got this, or I've got that, and you just kind of start to see yourself building a piece as you're looking at all these objects, and you start to see which objects seem to want to go together. And sometimes it takes some experimentation where, you know, you're putting things on there and you're like, no, that's not going to work. And so you scrounge around for something else, and, you know, maybe you found something that was hidden in the corner of the studio that you hadn't used for 10 years, but hey, that's perfect for this piece. So that's why I always keep stuff around, because even though it might not have a purpose for it now, eventually that purpose can find itself, and you're just like, man, I'm glad I held on to that miscellaneous whatever that is, because that's perfect as the centerpiece for this new piece. And then as you start to build it, you start to kind of see it, and it really does, from my head anyway, and from the heart, it just kind of starts to build itself. It becomes what it wants to become. Very rarely do I have an idea in mind ahead of time. It does happen. Sometimes I do get an idea and it's like, okay, I'm going to force this idea because, you know, I think I can make it happen. But most of the time it's just, you know, it's like music, playing a guitar or anything else. You know, the instrument is your hands, and the guitar is just your materials, and you're using those materials and how they want to come together. And when it finally becomes satisfactory to me and it feels good to me, that's when I'll say, okay, it's done. And this is it. This is the end result. And you then share it with everyone else. But each piece really is just a personal experience. Each piece is kind of based on where I'm at the time, what I'm feeling, what's just, you know, again, it's all about letting things flow as naturally as you can. And again, sometimes these things just work, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes parts just don't work together as much as you want them to.
Like in anything, yeah.
Yeah, but you try to be, go ahead.
We work a lot with intuitive artists and art therapy. I'm getting certified in art therapy. And one of my friends, Joyce Dillon, does loss and grief and heal thyself. She calls it transformational art. And
Sure.
It's interesting to me, interesting that you're building that community where you can go into nature and she talks about the drumming and the singing and the dancing and going into nature to ground yourself. And oftentimes in her retreats, she'll do that and then come back and allow the meditative intuition guide you through the creative process. And it sounds like you do that. I find art to be very spiritual, and sometimes you get lost in this. That's why I talk about Hart being the healing power of art, because I'm talking about, again, what you just described. It's not that we're all fine artists. Of course, I think you are, but it's getting lost in the therapeutic creative process and what comes.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah,
we're kind of
sure.
getting down to sort of the last couple of questions here, but let me go this way. And as I said, people looking at your art now, you've been doing this found object art a while, so that's one thing for people to realize, right? This is
Sure.
This is someone who's matured their art over a period of time and a lot of work. But let's say somebody's sort of, they're kind of shopping for a medium, and hey, maybe I'm kind of intrigued with this found object idea. If I better not look too much at Robert Dampier's work, because it's going to blow me away and I'm not going to be able to do that. But how do I start? What would you say to an artist who's trying to maybe begin and to explore this a little bit?
I think the most important thing is just to be open. It's all about openness. Even when I was a kid, what really kind of even started all of this is when I was a kid, I grew up, we didn't have a lot of money. I grew up with a mother who, was taking care of me and everything else. And so, we just didn't have a lot of money and resources. And so for me, I would take an old deodorant, deal, and I would take little pipe cleaners and I would turn it into a robot, and I would take a toy that was broken, and okay, I can't afford a new toy, but if I take this toy and I meld it with this one, then all of a sudden I've got a super toy that no one else has. And so it was really kind of birthed out of that, is just, when you don't have, because as an artist, you always think, oh, I need new paints, I need this, I need canvases, I need, and so when you grow up without a lot of resources, you learn to look for what's around you. And when I started doing that, I found that, well, there's actually quite a few things around if I just am open and work from what I have. And that's always how it's been, is just working with what you have. And then you find that the things that you need come to you. And so, for a beginning artist, I would just say, work with whatever you have. If you've got stains, work with stains. If you've got coffee, you've got a stain. If you've got tea, you've got a stain. And with those stains, you can do a painting or something abstract or whatever. You can work with cloth. You can work with whatever. Work with what you have. And from that, you'll be able to explore different materials, explore what it is that drives you and what you're actually really good at. Because, when I first started doing art, I tried to go into painting first, because I felt like that was where, as an artist, you're supposed to be a painter. And man, I had a rough time of it. And it just didn't gel. Some paintings were pretty good. Some I was kind of happy with, but it was when I was downtown, when I was about 18, I moved to downtown Houston in a warehouse district and started hanging out with a bunch of other artists. And there were so much trash around the city of Houston, just all over, pieces of metal, just whatever, that it became, okay, I'm going to look around here. And then I found out what assemblage was. And I thought, oh, okay, hold on. This is an art form. I can use whatever I have around me to make art out of. Okay, this is interesting. So then I started working with what I had around me as far as assemblage wise, and assemblage just came, like it just worked. To be able to create a painting or create something just with the objects that you have around, because that's kind of what I'm trying to do, is create paintings with objects. And that's kind of what assemblage is to me. It's a painting made of things. And what's great about it is the painting changes depending on where you are with the assemblage, because it is three-dimensional. It has depth. So I just fell in love with it that way. And as far as, you know, art's just one of those things you have to do because you have to do it. And it's just good to do. You can't think about how you're going to make money at it. You can't think about whether or not you're even good at it. It doesn't matter if you're good at it. You just have to produce it. And eventually, if you produce enough of it, you'll find that you're actually good at it. So you have to do it. That's really to me, the key to any artist is just to make. And as long as you're making, just don't judge it. Don't judge it whether it's good. Don't judge it whether it's bad. Don't judge whether or not anyone else is going to like it or even care if anyone else likes it. You just have to do it because it's what you want to do. It's what's inside of you. And again, if you do it enough, you're gonna become good at it. That's just the way nature works. It's like riding a bike. You know, everyone stinks at riding a bike at first, and you skin your knee and fall off several times. But eventually, after a while, you stay on your bike, and eventually now you can travel anywhere you want.
It's the metaphor. It's the metaphor I was thinking of exactly. That art is life, and life is art, right? I mean, one could say that what it is to craft a life is putting together objects that you find, where you are, starting with what you have and crafting something out of that, right? And so it's embodied in your art. It's now embodied in how you live and the place you live and the way you're constructing the place you live. It all kind of fits together in a certain harmony. So that's fantastic. We really appreciate your time today in laying this out. We've got several, as Honor said, several other things we'd like to do with you in the future. Love to have a bit of a tour of your studio and see some of your art and some things like that. Maybe if we can do that in the future. But how do people, get in touch with you or follow you? What's your online presence, or how would we put that out for people?
Well, I'm on Facebook, Robert Dampier, and then I've got robertdampier.com. Okay. Which you can find me at my website. But I will say, I have not updated the website since we've been here over a year because we've been out here.
Because we're living the assemblage life.
Yeah. So here pretty soon, I hope to update the website with a lot of current stuff that's not.
And Instagram as well.
Instagram as well.
Robert Dampier.
Robert Dampier on Instagram as well. Okay. Well, that's great. And we'll have some stuff about you on the Hart Initiative website also, which is heartinit.org. As in put your heart in it, right? Heart Initiative. So we'll have that as well. So Honor, final comments, thoughts from you before we wrap up this week?
Einstein said creativity is imagination is more important than knowledge. And I think you've taken that to a whole nother level. What you do with knowledge and how you create this beautiful life that you're sharing with us. We look forward to sharing your story and how we can create a better life for all of us. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's nice to
fantastic.
meet you.
Yeah, Robert and Tulisha Dampier, we appreciate it. And thanks from the Hart Initiative. This is Barclay Brown for the Hart Studio, the Hart Studio show for the Hart Initiative. You can find us at heartinit.org, and we'll see you on the next show.
Viva Big Ben. Thank you.
Thanks. Peace.